Tonight's menu, it's all about the wonderful things that come from Nelson. It's about tomatoes predominantly. New Zealanders have a real sort of love affair with tomatoes. Statistically, it's proven that 90% of New Zealand savoury recipes have a can of tomatoes in them. You know, we just love tomatoes. Look how many tomatoes I got on the bench. That's just for morning tea. Nelson and tomatoes were synonymous for me. And the other reason we're going to Nelson is for those delicious scallops. Nelson scallops are kind of famous, aren't they? They're so jolly delicious and they're so luxurious, and I knew we'd get a whole lot for nothing. So we're going to have a lovely little scallop entree. We're going to have a lasagna main. It's pretty much a Kiwi classic. It's in every cafe. All the books have a lasagna. Everybody made lasagna back when I was growing up. And I think you've got to have a crumble. I think it's the best thing to come home to on a sort of a winter's evening, or any evening, actually. Even in the summer, you could let it cool down and eat it cool. And so, crumble it is. On the show tonight, we've got scallops with old-time scallopers Jack and Molly. We're going to find some cunning ways with tomatoes and eggplant with an ex-All Black. And we're going to find a humble crumble at a fancy lodge. Scallops are going to be our entree tonight. They're a luxury food. So that really is only going to suit us to have as an entree because we can't afford to have them as a main. They are one of the prime things from the sea. Texturally, they're soft, they're tender, they're rich, but they have flavour. It's a very sort of subtle flavour and it lends itself to all sorts of things. They're one of the great sort of surf and turf dishes. They're sexually mature at 2 years and they're ready to be plucked out of the sea at 3 years. So, you know, go figure that one. About 4 years ago, we exported $12.5 million worth of scallops to France, of all places. Last year, there was only $2 million worth exported, and I don't think that was because the French didn't want them anymore. I think it's just because there's none out there. They're sort of another form of economy, another form of wealth. You can have them for nothing, you can eat them any which way. 50 a day you can eat. And I'd challenge anybody to get through 50 a day. You're always going to have to be giving them away. Showing hospitality, it's just... yeah, it's the real Kiwi way. Jack and Molly Valance have been camping and scalloping at Tahara Motor Camp in Golden Bay for 34 years, and Jack cannot imagine a life without scalloping.
It would be like being without my wife. It's a talking point. It's a challenge to go out and get them and find where they are. And when you're on it, that's your secret. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you get attached to. And it's just terrific.
Jack and Molly took me out on a boat to their top secret scalloping spot. Here I am about to eat a raw scallop for breakfast.
Bon appetit. Absolutely delicious.
So how many scallops do you reckon you'd taken out of the sea in that time?
Hundreds. Virtually hundreds. I can't say thousands because I'll be told off, but no, virtually hundreds.
Yeah. You know, there's luxury food, isn't it? Isn't this a great thing?
It is. Where else in the world can you come to a motor camp, put your boat in the water, go out and get some scallops and come back within an hour? Yeah. There's not many places in the world you can do it.
No. So Molly, is that always your job, the sort of the dirty cleaning job, the fiddly bits?
Well, it's the fiddly bits, and I'm a bit more fussy than what Jack is, because he'll eat the black part. But I cut it off.
Yeah, well, it was out on that boat, I think it was a hard job stopping him eating the shells, Molly.
Oh, they're a bit hard to digest, just a wee bit, and they're pretty crunchy.
Because I can't open them, I get this job. But I don't even eat them, so I don't know why I even help them. Do you?
No, I'm confused. Is this your sort of kitchen area out here?
Yes. This is where we eat and barbecue and entertain.
And do all the preparation.
And do a lot of the preparation.
Fantastic.
Yes.
This is where it all happens.
So this is your summer kitchen?
This is our summer kitchen.
Right.
I'd really love going and seeing other people's kitchens. That's the absolute best thing. I love seeing how they operate in them. But Jack and Molly's kitchen outside that caravan, that's the best kitchen I've been in a long time. I mean, the view was quite extraordinary, just over those sand dunes out into Golden Bay. It was warm, it was all organised because they've been doing it for so many years. Everything had its place, everything was in its place. And it was just a magnificent kitchen. I wanted to move in, I suppose. How hot do you have it? As hot as you can, or?
No, you don't want them too hot.
He was happy with the fact that he was putting them onto basically a very cold barbecue hot plate.
If you overcook them, they'll go tough.
All right.
You don't want to burn them, you just want to heat them and eat them.
And brown the bread a bit, firm up the egg, crisp.
Yeah, a wee bit.
The thing that occurred to me was the way Jack cooked those scallops on that barbecue was like crumbing scallops and then sitting on the dashboard of your car in the sun for the morning, because they sort of just warmed up in the same sort of way and there wasn't much browning going on. You're not looking for an instant sizzle?
No, nothing like that at all.
Okay, how hot would you have it, Molly?
A bit hotter than what he's got.
Yeah, would you be looking for a bit of sizzle?
Yes, I would be.
Yeah, I think I would too. I'm with you. That looks like a goodie. Check that out.
We'll put them on there.
No, we won't. We'll put it in here.
It's going to burn your tongue.
Will it? Did it burn yours?
A wee bit.
All right.
Different texture, isn't it?
I actually, it's awfully good. I actually prefer them cooked, I'm sorry, Jack, to raw out of the boat. They're just when they're firmed up from the cooking. It's just, well, they're very, very good. They were delicious because they were so jolly fresh.
So you'd say they're good.
They're not good, Jack. They're bloody excellent. So coming up after the break, we're looking at tomatoes and Nelson. And we're going to go and meet a guy who was an ex-All Black who was famous for his hairdo. When I was a kid, tomatoes meant the things that your parents grew out on the vines out in the backyard. But the thing I remember, I suppose, most from my childhood about tomatoes is that smell of the things on the vine. We didn't get tomatoes all year round back in those days. We got tomatoes from the garden, and you had Nelson tomatoes. So I grew up with this idea that Nelson was just a place where tomatoes grew, and as it turns out, it was pretty much. I mean, most of downtown Nelson was all glass houses, all Italians in glass houses. Even up until the 70s, there were as many as 50 Italian families growing tomatoes. Well, we're here in Nelson today to cook a main dish which really brings together three great loves of my life. Tomatoes, which, well, I just love them, I still grow them. Lasagna, which is just to die for. And rugby, which I just adore. You read those South African names and your blood boils. But we're going to see Graham Thorne because, well, he's the guy with the hair, you must remember that, the perm. And he's got this rather fascinating recipe for eggplant and tomato and all that sort of carry on, which is a bit lasagna-y. And let's face it, who on earth was eating eggplant in 1978 who wasn't an Italian tomato grower?
Good evening.
Graham Thorne, ex-All Black, ex-MP, currently spends his days in the Nelson region where he grows grapes and drinks wine. And he still stands behind that recipe.
I just thought this was different, and it's quite easy to make. And you have to think about this, that people think cooking is hard. It is not hard. It is simple, as long as you, A, follow the recipe, and B, read it before you do it to think that you've got all the ingredients. But it was something that was quite simple, but it had a sort of touch of the exotic that it wasn't New Zealand. Right, well, we've got some eggplants, and so we're going to be real wanky, and we're going to actually peel them down there. Now we slice them down the middle, and then comes the difficult part, because you have to go around them and take the pip out.
Doesn't say that in your recipe.
It does.
Not in your recipe.
Well, what's this one?
Graham's method that time was completely different to his one in the book. I thought that was a bit shabby and was trying to point that out to him all the time, that he was doing it completely differently. And I kind of like the way he did in his book, but, you know, I'm not got too good a manners to really get into him. But rub salt into the... you're going to make an incision, a deep slit.
No, I'm doing it this way. This is...
so this is modified.
We've come forth from that.
Right.
You know how food actually... what's the word I'm looking for? Comes of age? And this is how you do it, because this will look fantastic, I can tell you. Bear with me. Chop up some onions, some tomatoes, you put in some cumin, some garlic, some salt.
And there's some tomato paste.
This adds a bit of colour, because the tomatoes, you don't get that colour, do you?
No.
That's why a lot of people actually like like to use tomatoes out of the tin. Oh, Paul Babel. We threw a bed out of a hotel in Durban. Oh, what am I saying? Those Springboks, say hi was once again led by the nose. Oh, more gullible All Black.
Thorny's recipe says you stuff your eggplant with the tomato mixture and then you poach it in the oven in a covered dish.
About 175, and you leave it in for about 40 minutes probably, although less than that because they're smaller than the ones that I usually do. What did he say? Bon appetit or something?
Yeah, well, that's right. Here's to the Pinot to start with, and then we'll get onto the eggplant. Right.
No, good manners, lad.
Elegance from the 70s. It's very good. Well, it's the first time I've ever eaten eggplant with an All Black, and that was a big thing for me, and it was the first time that I've ever been sort of semi-drunk eating eggplant with an All Black, and it was a great pleasure. Thorny's a great fella at the table, full of stories, full of fun, full of eggplant. But it's a great dish, and it's sort of
Simple.
That's right, and it would keep those sort of vegetarians happy if they came round.
No, let them stay in the car park and eat the tyres.
That's right. So anyway, now we're going to head off and we're going to have some delicious crumble at a fancy lodge. We got crumble on the menu because, well, it'd be a pretty shabby sort of show about New Zealand food if we didn't have crumble. I mean, it's the best dessert. I know that pavlova's the iconic Kiwi dessert and all that sort of thing, but crumble's the one that kind of makes the wheels of the nation go round. It's what made this the great country we are today. Tertia Koppel cooks at the Motueka River Lodge, which is lucky for the guests who stay there because they get to experience her flash crumble.
Well, the crumble is really a staple dessert, I guess. I remember it from my own childhood, and throughout my cooking career I've been cooking it from time to time in various different places. So it's just a dessert that is easy to prepare, it's cheap, and it can be very rustic in style, yet it can be quite upmarket if you individualise it and depending on what you put with it.
What's the genesis of this recipe? Does it come from anywhere?
Well, the crumble, it stems from Alison Hoff's recipe.
Bring water, sugar, cinnamon stick and orange zest to the boil. Take it off the heat and add chopped apples and rhubarb. Leave it to stand for 10 minutes. If I was doing this, my tendency would have just shut the lid on and boil the bejesus out of it. But this is so much more sort of delicate approach.
More delicate.
Yeah.
The reason why I do it like this is so the rhubarb doesn't lose its shape, it stays in a whole form.
Is that delicate balance because you want the moisture underneath to soak into the bottom of the crumble, because it's that, isn't, for me, the crumble thing is the crunch on top and then that gooey. When I was a kid, I'd eat the fruit first and I'd even sort of like eat the ice cream before I'd eat the crunchy crumble, especially if it had that doughy, fruity, gooey layer. The liminal.
Yes, I think that's
point.
the...
That's where the joy of crumble exists.
or the art of crumble, maybe.
Maybe. That whole, it's overwhelmingly delicious. To make the crumble, mix together half a cup of plain flour, half a cup of rolled oats, half a cup of dark sugar, cinnamon, mixed spice, 75 grams of butter and half a cup of sliced almonds.
So now we put it in the oven, into a preheated oven at 190 for approximately 20 minutes.
Tertia's crumble was just top of the line. She was a top crumble chick. The chewy things going on. And this is sort of such a delicate portion, of course. Normally I'd just eat the whole lot straight out of the dish, but we're guests. You know, I mean, I expressed my reservations about the nuts and stuff, having been a straight down the line kind of guy, but the nuts are working for me on the rolled oats. I mean, I would have said earlier it was gilding the lily, but it's very good. This is, well, I don't think I'll put a cinnamon stick in every time I make it, but I think it's really worth a go, a bit of a cinnamon stick. Well, thank you very much for that, Tertia. That's just wonderful.
You're welcome.
After the break, we're cooking in my Kiwi Kitchen. Right, so now we're in my kitchen and I'm going to cook a version of all those dishes we've seen the experts and Nelson cook, and we're going to start with the scallops, and I'm using frozen ones, but my theory on that is it's really the art of being a good cook, is not being able to make really flash expensive stuff taste good, but if you can make the ordinary cheap frozen stuff taste good, then you really know what you're doing. So I've got my scallops, got some tomatoes, garlic, lemons. I'm also going to need some butter, some oil and some herbs of some sort. I'm going to get some thyme from outside. Thyme? Why thyme? Well, it's raining and it's right by the back door, and it's delicious, of course. It's important to have everything ready when the pan's hot. So have a couple of tablespoons of finely diced tomato, a lemon cut ready, the thyme minced up, garlic chopped finely, and the scallops. Pat them dry. I'm going to use paper towels. The key is to pat them dry on the outside. That's what all that paper towel nonsense is about, because when it hits the pan, you want it to seal on the outside and keep all the moisture in and make it tender and all that sort of carry on. Get the pan hot, add a dollop of oil, a good tablespoon of butter, throw in the garlic and add the well-dried scallops. You know, you can turn them over, but I just give them a shake and roll them around, and I'm able to feel when they're about ready, because they firm up more and more as we go through. And these ones now are coming out just right. To make the sauce, throw in a bit of water. That was exciting, wasn't it? Add your diced tomatoes, your thyme, juice of the lemon, and just to glaze that pan to make a delicious scallopy garlic sauce. So we'll spoon that over the top of them. That's an entree with a piece of bread beside it to mop up. That's the scallops done. Now we're going to get on with making that lasagna. In my vegetable lasagna, I have onions, of course, garlic, a little grated carrot, silver beet, red and green peppers, aubergine, zucchini, and mushroom. Put all the vegetables in this pan to saute/fry. So in there, all those vegetables, including Thorny's eggplant for you, which brings me to tea towel of the week. This is a little cracker, isn't it? This is the New Zealand Rugby District's tea towel. Isn't that lovely? I need a little salt in there too, because if I don't put it in now, I'll forget to put it in later. It'll take maybe 10 minutes to be soft and tender, and then we can set it aside. And in the meantime, we'll get on with making the white sauce and the tomato sauce. My tomato sauce is incredibly simple, just 2 cans of tomatoes in there, some garlic raw thrown in there, some dried oregano, and about half a cup of red wine. Put it in there, season it with a bit of salt, whir it up with your 6-inch power wand. Bob's your uncle, fastest tomato sauce in the West. To make the white sauce, in a pot, 2 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of white flour, cook briefly, then add a cup and a half of milk. Whisk up until the lumps are kind of small. They'll break up later when it bakes. Bring it to the boil, season, take off the heat and add a cup and a half of grated cheese. So we've got some nice fresh lasagna sheets from the supermarket, any brand will do. First got to get the dish ready, a bit of oil in there, just a wee splash, and it's tomato sauce, about a quarter of it. Put that in there and then shake it all around. Put in some pasta, the first sheet of that. Gonna have to be tricky here and cut it to make it. So here's some scissors. This is good fun for people who are practicing for tiling their bathrooms. You can sort of work out exactly how much you need. We've got the vegetable mixture there, which we remember cooking earlier, and it's cooled down nicely. And I can add the cottage cheese to it. I'm going to add half a container of one of those. And 1 egg. Mix it all up. Really tempting to pile the stuff on in there and feel generous that way, but it's not going to hold together as well when you're trying to get it out and onto a plate. Poke it right through and make a lot of holes right the way through down to the bottom, and that means you won't get a pasta dome in the middle. And that needs to go into a 180-degree oven for about 2 hours. Right, so now it's onto the crumble. And I just think back for a minute of Tertia's lovely crumble. She did make a lovely one. I'm making a different one. It's a whole lot simpler. There's no mucking around with the fruit to start with. So it's just a flour, butter, sugar topping, and the fruit's going to cook itself completely underneath that. Add a heaped tablespoon of flour and a quarter cup of sugar. Now that's a completely seat-of-the-pants intuitive measure. Fruit's all ready. Take a bowl that's sort of big enough to slop things around. 2 cups of flour. Could be self-raising if that's what you got, it doesn't really matter. And these aren't exact measures again. I'm going to add 3/4 a cup of this sugar, which is demerara, or sort of raw sugar. And I think I want about 1/2 a cup of butter, which looks like that. And then, well, there's only one way to do this. You can kind of do it in a food processor, but it makes it a bit too, well, like sand and not like crumble. We really, if you want crumble, you want crumble. You don't want sand, if you get the drift. So this is ready for the oven. Luckily it's the same temperature as the lasagna because it's going into the oven with the lasagna for a short time, which just gives me time to go and do a bit of work on the cricket pitch. Whoa, this is a beauty. But it really needs to rest though, so the whole thing firms up, easy to cut, doesn't fall apart on the plate. Well, I can barely resist eating it just as it is now. But anyway, 20 minutes, it's resting. I'm going to go and set the table. I'm very pleased with all of this. I've got my beautifully brown scallops. I think Jack would be very happy with these. I'm pleased with my lasagna. It's not quite Thorny's, but boy, it's a goodie. And then there's my lovely buttery kitchen table crumble. It's awfully good. I don't know where to start, but so I'm going to say goodbye now and thank you for coming to my Kiwi Kitchen. I want to get tucking into this stuff before it goes cold, and I think the crew do too. So come on fellas, come and have something to eat. Set yourselves down. Ready?